A poor girl enters the billionaire's garden to pick flowers. He yells, but after she says one sentence, he falls to his knees. The sun scorched the asphalt as Lila left her house for the third time that morning. Her bare feet already knew every stone, every hole, every corner where something useful sometimes appeared. 5 years were too few to fully understand the world, but they were enough to know that food didn't just appear on the table. The street was empty, as it always was at that hour, when the heat made people hide indoors. Lila didn't have that luxury. She needed to find something, anything. Her thin legs carried her slowly along the cracked sidewalk. There was no hurry. Hurry was for those who were sure of where they were going. Lila just walked, her eyes attentive to any movement, any shadow that might hide an opportunity. An old woman had thrown out a bag on the corner. Lila approached cautiously. Inside, only potato peels and scraps that even she couldn't use. She sighed. It wasn't the first time she had come back empty-handed. She kept walking. The dust clung to her sweaty feet, creating a grayish layer that was already part of her. When was the last time she had a real bath? She couldn't remember. Maybe it didn't matter. Her stomach rumbled softly, a sound she had learned to ignore. Her mother was home, lying in the dark bed, and depended on her. That certainty was what kept her going, even when her legs ached and the sun beat down mercilessly. She turned a random corner, following the same path as always, when something in the air changed. A sweet, strong scent filled her nostrils, different from anything she knew on those dry streets. It vaguely resembled something her mother used to mention on good days, when she still smiled and talked about beautiful things. Flowers. Lila stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, raised her small face, and took a deep breath. The perfume grew stronger. It came from somewhere nearby, but she couldn't see from where. All the houses in the area were the same. High walls, closed gates, no gardens. She followed the scent as if an invisible thread was pulling her forward. She took a few more steps and turned another corner. There it was, a garden that seemed to have fallen from the sky in the middle of that forgotten street. Red roses, white roses, pink roses swayed gently with a breeze Lila didn't even know existed. The green of the leaves was so intense it hurt her eyes, accustomed to the gray of the dust. The iron gate was ajar. Lila stood there for a time she couldn't measure, just looking. She had never seen anything like it. It was as if someone had painted a piece of the world with colors she thought only existed in dreams. She approached slowly. The gate was indeed open, just a little, but enough for a small girl to pass through. She looked around. The street was still empty. No one to see, no one to ask what she was doing. She took another deep breath. The perfume enveloped her like a warm hug. She entered. Her bare feet touched soft grass she didn't know could exist. It was unlike anything. Cool, clean, as if someone brushed it every day. She walked among the flowers with small, careful steps, afraid of breaking something. Roses were everywhere. Big and small, open and closed, some with drops of water that shone like tiny diamonds. Lila slowly reached out and touched a petal. It was as soft as she imagined a cloud would be. Her mother would love this. The memory hit her like a punch to the chest. Her mother lying on the bed, her face pale against the dirty pillow, her eyes mostly closed. When she could still speak, she sometimes mentioned flowers. She said they reminded her that the world had beautiful things. Lila didn't quite know what that meant, but at that moment, looking around, she thought she might understand a little. She chose a white rose that was wide open, perfect. She extended her small hand toward the stem, thinking about how happy her mother would be to see it. Maybe she would even smile. It had been so long since Lila had seen a true smile. Her fingers were almost touching the flower when a deep voice broke the silence. "What are you doing here?" Lila froze. Her hand stopped in the air, a few centimeters from the rose. Her small heart pounded, but she didn't turn immediately. She knew the voice belonged to a man. She knew she was in trouble. Slowly, she turned her body toward the voice. A tall man stood on the house's porch, watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. He had gray hair and wrinkles around his eyes. He wore a simple shirt and dark pants. He didn't look angry, exactly, but he didn't look happy to see her there either. "I asked what you were doing in my garden," he repeated, descending the porch steps with slow but firm strides. The voice was deep, serious, the kind of voice Lila had learned to fear. Adults with voices like that usually meant trouble. But something strange happened. Instead of running, which would have been the sensible thing to do, Lila stayed where she was. Perhaps it was the exhaustion from endless walks. Perhaps it was the hunger that made everything a little confusing. Or perhaps it was just the beautiful rose, so close. In a quick and delicate movement, she closed her fingers around the flower's stem and picked it. The man stopped walking, his eyes fixed on the small hand that held the rose as carefully as if it were made of crystal. "My mother is sick," Lila said, her voice softer than she intended. She always liked flowers. The words flowed naturally, without planning. It was the simplest truth she knew, said in the most direct way she could. There were no elaborate excuses, no lies, just a daughter trying to bring a little joy to her mother. Lila's words struck Jack like lightning. "My mother is sick. She always liked flowers." Something inside him broke. His legs gave out, and he fell to his knees right there in the middle of the garden. His hands trembled as they rested on the grass. Anna. His Anna, who also loved flowers, who tended that garden with such care, who died holding a rose just like the one the girl was holding now. Lila took a step back, startled. She didn't understand what had happened. Had she said something wrong? Was the man sick too? Jack raised his face. His eyes were moist, but there was no anger in them. There was something Lila couldn't name, something deep and painful and at the same time gentle. "Take it," he said, his voice choked. "Take the flower to your mother." They stood there, both of them, in silence. A small, dirty girl holding a white rose, and a man on his knees who had just found something he thought he had lost forever. "Take it," he simply said. Lila blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "You can take the flower," he repeated, his voice a little softer, "for your mother." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, Lila gave a small, sincere smile. "Thank you," she whispered. She walked toward the gate with careful steps, still holding the rose as if it were a treasure. When she reached the entrance, she turned one last time. The man was still there, watching her. "She's going to like it very much," Lila said before leaving. Jack stood in the garden for a long time after she disappeared around the corner. He looked at the spot where the white rose had been, now just an empty space among the other flowers. For the first time in years, the garden seemed different, and he couldn't decide if that was good or bad. Jack spent the entire night sleepless. He sat in the living room armchair, looking out the window toward the garden. The moon illuminated the roses, creating soft shadows among the petals. Everything looked the same as it always had, but something had changed. Something he couldn't name. The girl's image wouldn't leave his head. Those big, sincere eyes, the delicacy with which she held the rose, the simple words that knocked him down like a runaway train. "My mother's sick. She always liked flowers." Anna liked flowers too. Anna, who spent her last days holding a white rose just like the one the girl had taken. Anna, who smiled even when the pain was too strong to speak. Anna, who said that flowers reminded them that beauty still existed in the world, even in the darkest moments. Jack rubbed his face with his hands. He had promised himself not to think about her that night. He had been doing that for months since the funeral. But the girl had broken something inside him, a wall he had built brick by brick, day after day. When the sun rose, he had already been awake for hours. He had tasteless coffee, as he always did. He watered the roses, as he always did. He tried to read the newspaper, as he always tried and never managed to finish. But his eyes always returned to the gate, waiting for something he couldn't define. At 10 in the morning, she appeared. Jack saw her even before she reached the gate. The same worn outfit, the same bare feet. But there was something different. Her face was clean, as if she had washed herself with special care, and her eyes shone in a way they hadn't the day before. Lila stopped in front of the gate and looked directly at the porch, where Jack was sitting with a cup of coffee in his hands. She didn't enter the garden this time. She just stood there, waiting. "My mother smiled," she said, her voice carrying a joy that made Jack's heart skip a beat. When she saw the flower, Jack placed the cup on the small table beside the chair and stood up. He descended the porch steps slowly, without taking his eyes off the girl. There was something in the way she spoke, a genuine happiness he hadn't seen in a long time. She smiled, he asked, stopping a few meters from the gate. She smiled, Lila confirmed, nodding her head enthusiastically. She took the flower, smelled it very slowly, and smiled. It was the first time in a long time. Jack felt his heart clench. Anna used to do the same thing, hold the flowers close to her face and breathe deeply, as if she wanted to keep the scent forever. See, flowers help even on the hardest days, she always said. They remind us that the world still has beautiful things. How is she today? Jack asked, approaching the gate. The sparkle in Lila's eyes diminished slightly. Same as always, doesn't get up, barely talks. But she's holding the flower. She paused, as if she was thinking about how to explain something complicated. She put it in a glass of water. She keeps looking at it all the time. Jack felt something stir in his chest. It was pain, but it was also something more. Something he had lost when Anna died, and that was now returning little by little, like water filling a leaky bucket. Has your mother been sick for a long time? He asked, opening the gate. Lila entered the garden, but didn't stray far from the entrance. I think so. She stopped working a few months ago, then she stopped cooking. Then she stopped getting out of bed. The words came out naturally, as if she was talking about the weather. The doctor at the clinic said he couldn't do anything, that it was something in her head. Depression. Jack recognized the signs immediately. He had gone through the same symptoms after Anna's death. The difference was that he had money for a good doctor, expensive medicines, proper treatment, and even then it was a daily struggle to get back to living. And you take care of her alone? He asked. It's just the two of us, Lila replied, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. My father left when I was little, said he didn't want a daughter. She shrugged. Oh, but it's okay. I know how to take care of my mother. Jack looked at that small child, talking about responsibilities that even adults couldn't carry. 5 years taking care of a depressed mother, looking for food in the streets, surviving alone. And yet she had managed to smile when she spoke about the flower. Can I see how she is? He asked, moved by something he couldn't understand. Lila looked at him for a moment, as if she was gauging whether she could trust him. She must have seen something in his face, because she nodded her head. Come with me, she simply said. Jack closed the gate behind him and followed the girl down the street. She walked with quick, sure steps, knowing every stone on the path. He watched her bare feet touch the hot asphalt and wondered when she had last had shoes. They walked for about 15 minutes, passing through increasingly poorer streets. The houses got smaller, the walls lower, the asphalt more cracked. Jack hadn't been to that part of town in years. He had forgotten what it was like to live without being sure there would be food the next day. It's here, Lila said, stopping in front of a small brick house. The roof was low and seemed to need repairs. There was no garden, just a small dirt yard. The window curtains were makeshift pieces of fabric, probably remnants of old clothes. But everything was clean, organized as best as it could be. She's in the bedroom, Lila said, opening the front door. The house was even smaller inside, a tiny living room with 2 old but well-maintained pieces of furniture, a kitchen that was little more than a corner with a stove and sink, and a short hallway leading to 2 small bedrooms. Lila led him to the back bedroom. The door was ajar, and she pushed it open slowly. Mom, she said softly, I brought a visitor. Jack entered behind her and stopped. In the dark room, a young woman lay motionless on the bed. She must have been about 30, but looked older. Her face was pale and thin, her hair spread across the pillow. Her eyes were closed, but she didn't seem to be sleeping, just absent. In her right hand, she delicately held the white rose Lila had brought the day before. There was a glass of water on the bedside table, where the flower had probably spent the night. Jack felt the world spin. It was Anna, not physically, but it was her. The same fragility, the same pallor, the same way of holding a flower as if it were the only thing connecting her to the world. Anna's last days had been exactly like this. Carol, Lila said, approaching the bed. "This is Carol, my mother." Carol slowly opened her eyes, as if it required enormous effort. She looked at her daughter first, then at Jack. She showed no surprise or fear, just a passive acceptance of another event in a world that had ceased to make sense to her. "Hello," Jack said softly, approaching. Carol watched him in silence. Her eyes were the same brown as Lila's, but without the sparkle. It was like looking at a faded version of her daughter. "He gave me the flower yesterday," Lila explained, sitting on the edge of the bed. "From his garden." Carol's gaze shifted to the rose in her hand. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse from speaking little. Jack felt his throat tighten. "You're welcome." He stood there, observing the scene for a few minutes. Lila talked softly with her mother, telling her about the morning, about how she had cleaned her face before going out, about how beautiful the rose was. Carol listened in silence, sometimes nodding slightly. It was a simple, touching intimacy between mother and daughter, but Jack could see what Lila couldn't. Carol was sinking. She was in the same place Anna had been in her last months of life, when sadness weighed so heavily that breathing became a conscious effort. The difference was that Anna had a disease, Carol had depression, and depression, when treated properly, was curable. "Excuse me," Jack said, taking his cell phone out of his pocket. "I'm going to make a call." He left the room and dialed a number he knew by heart. "Dr. Williams, it's Jack Morrison. I need a favor." Dr. Williams had been Anna's doctor, a competent and compassionate man who had done everything he could to help. Now Jack needed him for someone else. "I have a situation here. A young woman with severe depression. No means to pay for private treatment. She needs urgent help." He quickly explained the situation. Dr. Williams asked a few questions and agreed to see Carol that same afternoon at his private practice. Jack would cover all costs. "I can send an ambulance to pick her up," the doctor offered. "I'll take her," Jack said. "So thank you, doctor." He returned to the room where Lila was still talking with her mother. "Carol," he said, approaching the bed, "I'm going to take you to see a doctor, a good doctor, who can help." Carol looked at him in confusion. "I don't have money for a doctor." "You don't need to worry about that," Jack said. "You just need to want to get better." Lila looked from one to the other, not entirely understanding what was happening. "Will my mother get well?" "We'll try," Jack said, feeling a determination he hadn't felt in months. "We'll try very hard." It took an hour to convince Carol to get out of bed. She protested weakly, said she was fine, that she didn't need a doctor. But Jack had gone through the same arguments with Anna. He knew every excuse, every attempt to avoid treatment. With patience and kindness, he and Lila managed to get Carol to stand up, take a quick bath, and put on clean clothes. She moved as if she were underwater, every gesture costing a lot of effort. When they left the house, Carol was holding the white rose in her hand. Jack had called a taxi, which was waiting for them on the street. Carol sat in the back seat with Lila, still holding the flower. Throughout the entire trip to the doctor's office, she didn't let go of the rose once. Dr. Williams received them personally. He examined Carol carefully, asked detailed questions about her symptoms, and talked with her at length in private. When he left the room 2 hours later, his face was serious. "Severe depression," he confirmed to Jack. "Probably started with the overload of caring for her daughter alone, worsened by financial difficulties. She needs hospitalization to stabilize, then regular psychiatric and psychological follow-up. Do whatever is necessary," Jack said. "The hospitalization could last a few weeks. Does the girl have somewhere to stay?" Jack looked at Lila, who was sitting in the waiting room, swinging her legs on the high chair, alone, small, with no one in the world but the mother who had just been hospitalized. "She'll stay with me," he said without hesitation. Dr. Williams looked at him in surprise. "Are you sure?" "It's a big responsibility." "I'm sure," Jack replied, and for the first time in months he was absolutely sure of something. Carol was admitted that same afternoon. When Jack explained to Lila that her mother would need to stay in the hospital for a while, she simply nodded. She didn't cry. She didn't ask difficult questions. She just accepted it, like a child who had learned too early that life sometimes takes people away. "She'll get well," Jack said, kneeling in front of Lila in the hospital corridor. "It will take a while, but she'll get well." "And me?" Lila asked, her voice small. Jack looked at that brave girl who had entered his garden looking for flowers for her sick mother, who had carried an impossible burden alone for someone so small, who still managed to smile when she talked about beautiful things. He looked around the hospital, the plastic chairs in the waiting room, the smell of disinfectant, the constant sound of footsteps and voices. Lila was sitting there, too small for the chair, her feet dangling in the air. "I will stay here," he said. "Both of us. Waiting for your mother." Lila looked at him for a long moment. "Will you stay with me?" "I will," Jack promised, feeling a certainty he hadn't felt in a long time. "I won't leave." It was a simple promise, but Jack knew it was the most important one he had made in years. Because no one, especially a 5-year-old child, should face that alone. The hospital's automatic doors closed behind Carol, with a final sound that echoed in the empty corridor. Lila stood exactly where she was, staring fixedly at the place where her mother had disappeared, as if she could make her return just by the strength of her gaze. Jack watched the girl in silence. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She didn't do any of the things he would expect from a 5-year-old child seeing her mother taken away by strangers in white coats. She just stood there, motionless, her small arms hanging at her sides, like a tiny porcelain statue someone had forgotten in the hallway. "Lila," he said softly. She didn't answer. She didn't even blink. It was as if the world had stopped the moment the doors closed. The hospital corridor was relatively quiet at that time of afternoon. Some nurses hurried by with clipboards in hand. Doctors talked in low voices near the information desk. The constant hum of medical equipment created a monotonous background soundtrack. But none of this seemed to register in the girl's mind. She was completely focused on that white door, waiting for it to open again. Jack approached slowly and knelt beside her, coming to her eye level. He could see the delicate profile of her face, the silent determination in her brown eyes, the way her lips were slightly contracted into a thin line of concentration. "She's going to be okay," he said, his voice low and careful. "The doctors will take care of her." Lila finally blinked, but didn't look away from the door. "When will she come back?" she asked, her voice so low that Jack had to lean in to hear. "I don't know yet," he answered honestly. He had learned that lying to children never worked. It could be a few days, it could be a few weeks. "It depends on how she responds to the treatment." Lila nodded her head, a small, controlled movement, as if she already expected that answer, as if she were already accustomed to uncertainties, to answers that weren't what she wanted to hear. Jack looked around the hospital. The environment was typical of healthcare institutions. White walls, linoleum floor that reflected the fluorescent lights, the characteristic smell of disinfectant mixed with something he couldn't quite identify. The plastic chairs in the waiting room didn't seem very comfortable for a small child. The air conditioning was strong, creating a cold draft that made the paper sheets on the information desk tremble slightly. Lila wore only a thin shirt and worn pants. She was probably cold, and hungry too. When was the last time she had eaten anything? "Come," he said, standing up and extending his hand. "Let's sit down." Lila looked at his hand for a moment before taking it. Her fingers were small and cold, but they closed around his with a surprising trust. She followed him to the waiting room without questioning, without resisting. The waiting room was typical of a hospital. Rows of blue plastic chairs arranged in groups, some low tables with old magazines scattered, a small television hanging in the corner showing a news program with the sound off. There were other people there, an elderly man sleeping in a corner chair, a young woman nervously flipping through a magazine, two children playing silently on the floor while their mother talked on the phone. Lila chose a chair directly facing the hallway, where her mother had disappeared, and sat with her back straight, her feet dangling in the air. Jack sat beside her, observing how she kept her eyes fixed in that direction, like a sentry on guard. "Are you cold?" he asked, noticing that she had crossed her arms over her chest. She shook her head no, but Jack saw that she was trembling slightly. The fine hairs on her arms were raised, "I'll ask for a blanket," he said, standing up again. At the information desk, a friendly nurse with grey hair and reading glasses hanging from her neck said she could find a blanket and maybe something for the girl to eat. "The cafeteria is closed," she explained, "but we always have some sandwiches and cookies reserved for emergencies." Jack thanked her and returned to Lila, who hadn't moved an inch, as if changing position might make her lose something important. "They brought you a blanket," he said, sitting down again. "Says they'll bring something to eat too." "I don't have money," Lila said automatically, a response she had clearly given many times in her life. "You don't need money," Jack said. "It's on me." Lila looked at him for the first time since they arrived at the hospital. Her eyes were big and dark, with a seriousness that shouldn't exist on a 5-year-old's face. "Why?" she asked. It was the second time she had asked that question, and Jack still didn't have a complete answer. Why was he doing this? Why did he care so much about two strangers he had only met 2 days ago? Why did he feel as if his life depended on taking care of that child? "Because you shouldn't be going through this alone," he finally said, and it was the most honest answer he could give. The nurse arrived a few minutes later with a light blue blanket and a sandwich wrapped in paper, as well as a small apple juice box with a straw. Lila thanked politely, with the careful courtesy of someone who had learned early to be grateful for any kindness. She accepted the blanket and wrapped herself in it, but kept looking at the sandwich as if she didn't know what to do with it. "You can eat," Jack said. "When was the last time you ate anything?" Lila thought for a moment, her eyes turning to the ceiling, as if she were doing mental calculations. "Yesterday morning, I think. There was some bread the neighbor gave." Jack felt his stomach clench. The girl had gone more than 24 hours without a proper meal. How was she still standing? How did she still have the energy to worry about her mother when she could barely take care of herself? "Eat," he said, more firmly this time. Lila unwrapped the sandwich slowly, with careful movements, as if she were opening a precious gift. It was a simple ham and cheese sandwich, but she looked at it as if it were a feast. She took a small bite, chewed slowly, then another. Jack noticed that she was trying to eat slowly to make it last, like someone who doesn't know when their next meal will be. "Ja, you can eat it all," he said, his voice softer. "If you're still hungry afterward, we'll ask for more." She looked at him in surprise, as if the idea of being able to eat until she was full was impossible, a concept that wasn't part of her world. They sat in silence for a while. Lila ate the entire sandwich and drank the juice, then curled up in the blanket and resumed watching the hallway. Jack just sat beside her, not pressing her to talk, not trying to distract her with empty conversations. He was just there, a solid and constant presence. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt he needed to be there for someone. It wasn't just pity or moral obligation, it was something deeper, more necessary. As if taking care of Lila was as important to him as it was to her, as if, in some mysterious way, she was also taking care of him by allowing him to take care of her. The afternoon passed slowly. The hospital had its own rhythm, different from the world outside. Other people arrived and left the waiting room. Worried families alternated between nervous whispers and tense silences. Patients awaited appointments, flipping through magazines without really reading them. Impatient children ran through the corridors until they were gently reprimanded by smiling nurses. But Jack and Lila remained motionless, in a silent vigil that seemed to have its own weight and meaning. The presence between the two was calm, almost mute, but full of meaning. They didn't need to talk to understand that they were taking care of each other. Jack was there so Lila wouldn't feel alone, and Lila was there giving Jack a purpose he had lost when Anna died. At 6 in the evening, a young doctor in a white coat appeared looking for them. He had dark hair and a kind expression, the kind of face that inspired confidence. He came to give news about Carol. "The patient is responding well to initial treatment," he explained, crouching down to be at Lila's height. "But it will be a long recovery. She will need to be hospitalized for at least 2 weeks, perhaps longer, depending on how she responds to the medication." Lila listened to everything, without showing any visible emotion. Her eyes remained focused on the doctor's face, absorbing every word as if she would carefully file them in her memory. She just nodded when the doctor finished speaking. "Can I see her?" she asked, her voice small but firm. "Tomorrow," the doctor promised with a gentle smile. Today she needs to rest. The treatment made her a little sleepy, but that's normal. When the doctor left, Lila looked back at the hallway. Jack realized she wasn't going to leave. She wasn't leaving as long as her mother was hospitalized there. "Fine, I'll stay here with you," he said. "All night?" Lila asked, turning her face to look at him. "All night," Jack confirmed. It wasn't an entirely rational decision. Sleeping in hospital chairs wasn't comfortable for a man in his 50s with back problems. He had a house with a soft bed waiting for him, a garden that needed watering, daily responsibilities he had abandoned. But looking at that small girl curled up in the blue blanket, her determined eyes fixed on the hallway, Jack knew there was no place in the world where he would rather be. The hours passed. Movement in the hospital gradually decreased. The corridor lights were dimmed to night illumination, and the constant sound of footsteps and voices gave way to an almost complete silence, broken only by the occasional sound of medical equipment and soft footsteps of nurses making their rounds. Jack dozed off a few times in the uncomfortable chair, his head leaning to the side, but always woke up checking if Lila was still there. She seemed more awake than him. Her eyes always turned to that corridor, as if her constant vigilance could somehow protect her mother. Around midnight, when the hospital was plunged into the deep silence of the early morning, she finally spoke. "Jack." "Yes," he replied immediately, straightening up in his chair. "Can I tell you something?" "You can tell me anything," he said, turning his body to face her. Lila was silent for a moment, looking at her own small hands holding the edge of the blanket. As if she was organizing her thoughts, deciding where to begin a story she might never have told anyone. "My mom lost her job a few months ago," she finally said, her voice low but clear in the quiet room. "She worked in a clothing store downtown. She liked her job. She always came home telling funny things that happened at the store." Jack listened without interrupting, feeling a knot form in his throat. "But she started getting sad. I don't know why. Maybe it was because my dad had left recently. Maybe it was because we were always worried about money." Lila pulled the blanket further up, covering her chin. "The store owner said she was getting too sad, that she was scaring customers, that they didn't like to see people crying." The naturalness with which she recounted such harsh details made Jack realize that this child had grown up too fast, had learned to deal with adult problems when she should still be playing with dolls. After she lost her job, she got even sadder. She stopped leaving the house. She stopped cooking. Sometimes she would stay in bed for 2 or 3 days. Lila paused, as if she was reliving those difficult moments. "We started living on almost nothing. The money she had saved ran out. Sometimes I would find something in the street. Sometimes the neighbors would give us food when they saw we needed it." "And you took care of her alone," Jack said, more of a statement than a question. "It was just the two of us," Lila said simply. "I tried to make her eat. I tried to make her take a bath. I tried to make her smile, but she just got sadder and sadder. Sometimes she would cry in the dark, thinking I wasn't hearing her." Jack felt the words weighing on his chest like stones. A 5-year-old child trying to care for a depressed mother, looking for food in the streets, carrying a responsibility that even adults couldn't adequately bear. "I just wanted to see her smile," Lila continued, her voice getting even lower, almost a whisper. "Then I remembered she liked flowers. Before, when we had money, she always bought flowers at the market on Saturdays. She said they made the house more beautiful, that they made her feel less alone. That's why you came into my garden," Jack said, finally understanding the desperate courage that had led a small child to trespass on a stranger's property. "That's why," Lila confirmed. "I thought if I brought her a flower, maybe she would remember when she was happy. And it worked." She smiled. She spoke of hunger naturally, as one would speak of the weather or the color of the sky. There was no self-pity in her voice, no anger or resentment against a world that had been cruel to her. Just the simple acceptance of a child who had learned too early that life was sometimes difficult, but that it was still worth fighting for moments of happiness. "Flowers made my mum remember that the world still has beautiful things," Lila said, concluding her story with a wisdom that shouldn't exist in someone so young. Jack felt something break and rearrange itself within his chest. It was pain, but not the destructive and paralyzing pain he felt when thinking about Anna. It was a different kind of pain, a pain that hurt, but at the same time made him feel more alive, more connected to the world. Compassion. That was it. For the first time in years, Jack felt compassion that didn't hurt, but rebuilt. A compassion that didn't diminish him, but made him grow. "Your mother is right," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "The world still has beautiful things." "It does?" Lila asked, turning her face to look at him, and there was genuine hope in her eyes. "It does," Jack said, looking at her with all the sincerity he could muster. "You are one of them." Lila smiled in the dark waiting room. It was a small but genuine smile that lit up her face like a lit candle in a dark room. "I too," she said, her voice filled with a certainty that surprised him. "You remind me that there are good people in the world." They were silent after that, but it was a comfortable silence, full of mutual understanding. Jack leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes, feeling a peace he hadn't felt in a long time. A peace that came from being exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he needed to do. He was caring for someone again. He was needed by someone. And that someone, in some mysterious and wonderful way, was also caring for him. Outside the hospital, the night continued its normal course. Cars passed in the streets. People slept in their warm beds. The world kept spinning with its usual indifference. But in the waiting room, a lonely man and a brave girl discovered that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose for ourselves. And that waiting together is always better than waiting alone. The next morning, after visiting Carol at the hospital, Jack made a decision that surprised him. "Lila," he said as they left the building, "would you like to come to my house until your mother gets better?" Lila stopped walking and looked at him with those big, serious eyes. "Are you sure?" "I am," Jack replied. And it was true. For the first time in a long time, he was absolutely sure of something. The drive to his house was silent. Lila looked out the car window, observing streets she had probably never seen before. When they arrived, she stood at the gate, looking at the house as if it were a castle. "Is this where you live?" she asked. "This is where we're going to live," Jack corrected, opening the gate. The house wasn't big, but it was cozy. Lila explored every corner with her eyes, carefully touching the furniture as if she was afraid of breaking something. "How about a bath first?" he suggested. "First, then we'll have lunch." He showed her the bathroom, left clean towels and one of his shirts that would serve as a nightgown. While she was washing, Jack prepared something simple: sandwiches, juice, some fruit. When Lila came out of the bath, she was unrecognizable. Without the street dirt, her brown hair shone. Jack's shirt was enormous on her, but it was clean and smelled good. "I feel different," she said, touching her own hair. "How do you feel?" Jack asked. "Clean," she replied, as if it were the most extraordinary thing in the world. They had lunch in the kitchen. Lila ate slowly, savoring each bite. Jack noticed that she chewed carefully, as if she wanted to store the taste in her memory. They didn't talk much, but there was a peace in that silence that Jack hadn't felt in years. After lunch, Lila looked out the kitchen window. "Can I see the garden?" she asked. "Of course, it's your garden now too." They went out the back door. Lila walked among the rose bushes with slow steps, delicately touching the petals. She paused before each flower, as if she were meeting a new person. "Do they have names?" she asked. Names? Jack had never thought of that. "No, they're just roses." "But they're different," Lila said, pointing to a large red rose. "But this one here is different from that one over there." She was right. There were roses of different sizes, different shades. Jack had always seen them as a group, but Lila saw each one individually. "Do you want to name them?" he asked. Lila's face lit up. "Can I?" "You can." She approached the large red rose. "This one will be Rose," she said solemnly. "Because she's the most beautiful," Jack smiled. "And the others?" Lila spent the afternoon walking through the garden, naming each flower. There was White, who was the purest rose; Little, who was still growing; Shy, who hid behind the leaves; Brave, who grew taller than the others. "Why did you choose those names?" he asked. Because they have personalities," Lila explained. "Rose is proud. Look how she holds her head up. Shy is embarrassed. That's why she hides." Jack looked at the flowers with new eyes. Lila was right. How had he never noticed that before? "Do they need water?" Lila asked. "They do. I water them every morning." "Can I help?" Jack got a small watering can. He filled it with water and showed Lila how to water without over-soaking, how to direct the water to the roots. Lila held the watering can with both hands, concentrating on the task. She went from rose to rose, talking softly to each one as she watered them. "Rose is thirsty today," she murmured. "That little needs to grow strong." Jack watched her with a tenderness that grew with each passing minute. There was something in the seriousness with which she treated the flowers, in the care she showed, that touched him deeply. When they finished watering, Lila sat on the grass beside him. "Did your wife like the garden?" she asked. The question caught Jack by surprise. It was the first time Lila had mentioned Anna. "She liked it very much," he replied. "She planted most of these roses." "Was she beautiful?" "She was," Jack said, feeling the familiar twinge of sadness, but this time softened. "So I think you two would get along well." "Would she smile if she saw me taking care of her flowers?" Jack looked at Lila, her hair shining in the sun, her serious eyes focused on the roses. "She would be very happy," he said, and he knew it was true. The following days fell into a natural routine. Lila woke early, had breakfast with Jack, visited Carol at the hospital in the morning and returned home for lunch. In the afternoon, they tended the garden together. Lila proved to be a dedicated helper. She quickly learned when the flowers needed water, how to identify pests, how to prune dry branches. But more than that, she brought life to the garden. She talked to the roses as she worked, told them stories, hummed songs she made up. The garden, which for so long had been a silent place, filled with life and joy. Jack found that he enjoyed listening to her. Her small voice created a soundtrack for activities he had always done in silence. It wasn't noise, it was music. "Rose is getting more beautiful," Lila said one afternoon. "I think she likes it when I talk to her." "Could be," Jack agreed. "Plants can tell when they're loved." "How do you know?" "Your mother told me once. She said that flowers get more beautiful when someone takes care of them with affection." Lila smiled and went back to talking to the roses. In the evening after dinner, they would sit on the porch. Lila asked questions about everything, about the stars, about the birds, about how flowers grew. Jack answered what he knew and made up what he didn't know, just to see her smile. Her presence, light and simple, filled a silence that had lasted for years. It wasn't just the absence of noise that Lila had broken. It was the emotional silence, the emptiness Jack had carried since Anna's death. With Lila there, the house had a soul again, the garden had a purpose again, and Jack, without realizing it, started living again. One night, while she slept in the room he had prepared for her, Jack stayed awake thinking. A week ago, his life was predictable and empty. He woke up, tended the garden, ate, slept. It was an existence, not a life. Now there was someone to care for, someone who depended on him, someone who made him laugh, who made him see the world with new eyes, someone who had transformed his garden into a magical place where flowers had names and personalities. Lila had not only found a home, she had given Jack a home back. And for the first time since Anna's death, Jack found himself thinking about the future with hope. He didn't know what would happen when Carol got better, but he knew he no longer wanted to live in silence. He wanted to hear Lila talking to the roses. He wanted to see her running through the garden. He wanted to take care of her and let her take care of him. He wanted a family again, and perhaps he had already found one. The rain had started during the night. Jack woke up to the sound of raindrops hitting the roof, a soft, constant noise he had learned to love over the years. The rain was good for the garden. Anna always said that rainwater was better than tap water, that plants could feel the difference. He got up early, as he always did, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. Through the window he could see the wet garden. The earth was dark and moist, the roses heavy with drops running down their petals. It was a beautiful day, even with the cloudy sky. Lila appeared in the kitchen a few minutes later, her hair messy from sleep and wearing his shirt as pajamas. It had become a sweet custom to see her every morning like that, small and sleepy, looking for him as if she wanted to make sure he was still there. "Good morning," she said, rubbing her eyes. "Good morning, little one," Jack replied, pouring her a glass of milk. "Did you sleep well?" "I dreamed about the roses," Lila said, sitting at the table. "They were talking to me." "What did they say?" "That they were happy because you took care of them, and that they liked me too." Jack smiled. In the past few days, Lila had become a natural part of his morning routine. They had coffee together, talked about the day, planned activities in the garden. It was simple and comfortable, as if it had always been this way. "We're not going to the hospital this morning," Jack said. "Your mother said yesterday that she wanted to rest. We'll go in the afternoon. Then can I stay longer with the roses?" "You can stay as long as you want." Lila smiled and took a sip of milk. "Did the rain do them good?" "It did. They love rain." After coffee, they went to the garden together. The rain had stopped, but everything was still wet. The air smelled of damp earth and flowers. Lila ran to her favorite roses, checking if they were well. "Look, Jack," she said, pointing to the rose she had named Little. She grew. Jack came closer to see. The rose really did look a little bigger than the day before. "You're right. The rain must have helped." "She was thirsty," Lila said with conviction. "I noticed yesterday." It was incredible how she had connected with the garden. In just a few days, she knew each rose individually, knew when they needed water, when something was different. She had a natural instinct that Jack admired. "Shall we water the others?" she asked. "Not today," Jack said. "The rain has already watered everything. But can I talk to them?" "You can." Lila crouched beside Rose, the big red one who had been the first to be named. She began to tell her about her dream from the night before, about how well she had slept, about how happy she was to be there. Jack watched her, feeling that growing tenderness that had become constant. There was something in the seriousness with which she treated the flowers, in the way she spoke to them as if they were friends, that touched him deeply. "Jack, come see," Lila suddenly shouted. She had moved to the back of the garden, where there was a small area he used for planting seedlings. Jack walked over to her, but when he stepped on the wet earth, his foot slipped. He tried to balance himself, but it was too late. He fell to the ground, his clothes getting muddy immediately. "Jack!" Lila ran towards him to help, but in her haste, she also slipped on the wet earth. She fell right beside him, splashing mud everywhere. For a moment, they sat there looking at each other. They were covered in mud from head to toe. Jack was about to apologize, to grumble about the inconvenience, when he heard a sound he hadn't heard in a long time. Lila was laughing. It wasn't a contained giggle or a polite chuckle. It was a free, genuine peal of laughter, from a child who found the situation hilariously funny. She laughed so hard she couldn't speak, just pointed at Jack and laughed even more. "You're all dirty," she managed to say between laughs. Jack looked at himself. He was indeed a mess. His white shirt was now brown, his pants had mud stains, even his hair had specks of dirt. And then, unable to control himself, he started to laugh too. It was a laugh that came from somewhere deep inside him, a place that had been silent for so long that he had forgotten it existed. A light, clean laugh, without bitterness or sadness. The first since Anna's death. Sitting there in the mud, they both laughed until their stomachs hurt. Lila laughed at Jack's dirty face. Jack laughed at how she looked like a little mud monster. They laughed at the absurd situation, at how they had become a disaster in a few seconds. When they finally stopped laughing, they sat there in the wet earth, smiling at each other. "We're a mess," Lila said, wiping a bit of mud from her face but only managing to spread more. "We are," Jack agreed, feeling lighter than he had felt in years. He sat up better beside her, no longer caring about the dirt. He looked at the garden around them, at the roses swaying gently in the breeze, at Lila beside him with her face covered in dirt and a radiant smile. And then the realization hit him like a lightning bolt. "I'm living again," he thought. He wasn't just existing, spending his days in an empty routine. He was truly living. laughing, feeling joy, taking care of someone and being cared for in return. A child had brought back what he thought was lost forever. Joy, the pure and simple joy of being alive, of sharing silly moments, of laughing until your stomach hurt. The joy that comes from having someone to care for, someone who cares if you're okay, someone who wants to be close to you. "Lila," he said, his voice a little hoarse with emotion. "Yes? Thank you." "Why?" Jack looked at her, this brave girl who had entered his life like a silent hurricane, changing everything without making a sound. "For reminding me how good it is to be alive," he said. Lila tilted her head, thinking, "You saved me first," she finally said. "You saved my mum. You gave me a place to stay. You taught me how to take care of the roses." "I think we saved each other," Jack said. Lila smiled and stood up, extending her small, dirty hand to help him. "Shall we take a bath?" she suggested. "Before we go see my mum." Jack accepted her hand and stood up. "Good idea." They walked into the house together, leaving muddy footprints along the way. Jack didn't care. For the first time in a long time, he didn't care about the mess, the dirt, the untidiness. He only cared about the sound of Lila's laughter echoing in his memory. In the afternoon, clean and tidy, they went to visit Carol at the hospital. She was getting better every day, more present, more like the mother Lila described in her stories. The treatment was working. Lila had brought a white rose from the garden, as she always did. Carol held the flower delicately, smelling it occasionally with a small but genuine smile. "How are you two getting along?" Carol asked Jack, while Lila talked about the morning rains. "Well," Jack said, "very well. She's not giving you trouble." "No trouble at all," Jack replied honestly. "In fact, she's helping me a lot." Carol observed him for a moment. "You look different, more cheerful." Jack looked at Lila, who was now arranging the rose in the small glass of water on the bedside table, carefully adjusting each petal. "I am different," he admitted. They talked for an hour. Carol told them how she was feeling better, how the medicines were helping, how she felt hope for the first time in months. Lila talked about the roses, about how each one had its own personality, about how she was learning to take care of them. It was a normal, familiar conversation, full of small, everyday details. But for Jack, who had spent so much time in silence, it was extraordinary. When they were getting ready to leave, Lila held the white rose she had brought and looked at Jack with her serious eyes. "Jack," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do you like these flowers so much?" The question was simple, but Jack felt its weight. He took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. It was a question he had never fully answered, not even to himself. "My wife used to tend this garden," he finally said, his voice calm but laden with memory. "When she passed away, I kept tending it. It was the only way to feel her close." Lila listened in silence, her eyes fixed on his face. "She planted almost all the roses that are there," Jack continued. "Each one was chosen by her. She knew the scientific name of all of them, knew when they bloomed, knew how to care for each type. Did she teach you?" "She did. We used to spend hours in the garden together. She talked about the flowers the way you do now, as if they were people." Jack paused, realizing he was able to talk about Anna without feeling the constant cutting pain. When she got sick, the garden was the last place she could be happy. Even when she couldn't walk properly anymore, she would ask me to take her there. She would sit in a chair looking at the roses. Lila extended her small hand and held his. The gesture was so natural, so full of understanding, that Jack felt his heart clench in a good way. "She must have been very kind," Lila said with conviction. "Like my mom." "She was," Jack agreed, and for the first time he could smile when speaking of Anna. "I think you two would get along very well. Would she be happy to see me taking care of her flowers?" Jack looked at Lila, her bright eyes, her clean, shining hair, the care with which she held the rose. He thought of Anna, how she had loved children, how she had always wanted a daughter. "She would be very happy," he said, and he knew it was the purest truth. For the first time since Anna's death, Jack was able to talk about her without the pain silencing him inside. The sadness was still there. It always would be. But it was no longer a pain that paralyzed him. It was a pain that connected him to the good memories, to the love he had shared. Lila had done that too. She had transformed his garden from a silent memorial into a living place again. She had given him back the ability to talk about Anna with love instead of just suffering. "I'll take good care of her flowers," Lila solemnly promised. "I know you will," Jack said. Carol Hunt, who had listened to the entire conversation in silence, wiped away a discreet tear. "So you two are lucky to have found each other," she said. Jack looked at Lila, who was now adjusting the rose in the small cup one last time before they left. "We are," he agreed, and for the first time in a long time, Jack felt truly lucky. On the way back home, Lila fell asleep in the car. Jack watched her through the rearview mirror, seeing her relaxed face, her messy hair, the way she held the small backpack that had become her constant companion. A week ago, he was a lonely man who cared for flowers to feel close to a dead woman. Today he was someone who laughed in the mud with a 5-year-old child and could talk about his wife with love instead of just pain. A small barefoot child had entered his garden looking for a flower for her sick mother, and unknowingly, she had brought back to life a man who had forgotten how to live. The sound of Lila's laughter still echoed in his mind, and Jack knew he would never forget that sound again. He would never forget how good it was to be truly alive. The news arrived on a sunny Thursday morning. Dr. Williams called Jack personally, his voice full of professional satisfaction. Carol was responding extraordinarily well to treatment. The medications had stabilized her mood, therapy sessions were showing significant progress, and she had expressed genuine interest in returning home. "She can be discharged at the end of the week," the doctor said. "It's an impressive recovery for the time of hospitalization." Jack felt a mixture of joy and apprehension. Joy because Carol was better, because Lila would have her mother back. Apprehension because he didn't know exactly what would happen when that happened. "So is she ready to take care of her daughter?" he asked. "She is, but she'll need continuous follow-up and a stable environment. No excessive stress for now." When Jack told Lila the news, she was silent for a long moment, processing the information. "My mum's coming back," she finally asked. "She's coming back," Jack confirmed. "She's much better, and I'm going home with her." Jack felt his heart clench. "Do you want to go back?" Lila thought carefully before answering. "I want my mum back, but I don't want to leave you. Or the roses." It was exactly what Jack felt, but he didn't know how to express it. In recent weeks, Lila had become an integral part of his life. The house without her would seem empty again, the garden too silent. "Let's see how things go," he said. "The important thing is that your mother is better." The next day, Jack made a decision. If Carol was coming home, he wanted her to find everything perfect. Lila and Carol's house needed to be clean, organized, with food in the fridge and flowers in the windows. "We're going to tidy up your house for when your mother comes back," he told Lila. Her eyes lit up. "Can we bring flowers?" "We're going to fill the house with flowers." They took the car on Friday morning, bringing cleaning supplies, groceries, and a bouquet of roses from the garden. The house had been closed for weeks, and Jack wanted it to be perfect for Carol's return. The small house was exactly as they had left it. Dust had accumulated on the furniture. The air was still and stuffy, but it was a place with potential, a home that just needed care to shine again. "Where do we start?" Lila asked, eager to help. "Let's open the windows first," Jack said. "Let the air in." They spent the whole morning cleaning. Jack scrubbed floors, washed bathrooms, organized the kitchen. Lila helped him as she could, dusting low places, arranging cushions, making sure everything looked nice. It was a collaborative and satisfying job. Jack found that he enjoyed preparing the house for Carol's return. There was something deeply gratifying about creating a welcoming environment for someone coming home. "She's going to be surprised," Lila said, looking at the clean, organized living room. "She's going to be very happy," Jack agreed. Around noon, Jack decided to clean Carol's room. There was an old dresser in the corner that needed organizing. He opened the first drawer and found folded clothes, some simple jewelry, various papers. In the second drawer, at the back, his fingers touched something different. It was a small, simple wooden frame. He pulled it out carefully. It was an old photograph, black and white, slightly yellowed at the edges. It showed two young women smiling, arm in arm. One of them was clearly Lila's mother. She had the same eyes, the same face shape, although she was much younger in the photo. "Lila," he called. "Come see this." Lila appeared at the bedroom door, drying her hands on a cloth. "I found this picture in your mother's drawer," Jack said, showing her the frame. Lila approached and looked at the image with interest. "Who are they?" Jack asked. "My grandmother," Lila said, pointing to the woman who looked like Carol, with a lady who was her friend. Jack looked more closely at the second woman in the photo. There was something familiar about that face, that smile. He studied the delicate features, the way she tilted her head, the way she held her friend's arm. And then recognition struck him like a lightning bolt. "That's my mother," he said, his voice softer than he intended. Lila looked at him in confusion. "Your mother?" Jack picked up the photo with trembling hands. There was no doubt. That was Martha Morrison, his mother in her early 20s. She had the same smile, the same clear eyes, the same elegant posture he remembered from other old photos. "I'm sure," he said, still looking at the image in disbelief. "This is my mother." A reverent silence filled the room. Jack and Lila stood there, looking at the photograph that connected their families in a way they never could have imagined. "Were they friends?" Jack finally asked. "I think so," Lila said, her voice small and full of wonder. "My grandmother always talked about a friend who was very good to her, who helped her when she needed it." Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. The past intertwined with the present in a way that seemed impossible, but it was there, documented in an old photograph. "Our families were united before you," he murmured. Lila delicately touched the frame. "Is that why you found me in the garden?" "Maybe," Jack said, still processing the discovery. "Maybe it wasn't a coincidence." They stood in silence for a while, absorbing the meaning of that discovery. Lila's entry into his garden, the encounter that had changed their lives. Perhaps it was more than chance. Perhaps it was a reconnection, a circle closing across generations. Jack carefully put the photo away. He wanted to show it to Carol when she came home. They spent the rest of the afternoon finishing the cleaning. Jack bought groceries and filled the fridge, prepared the house as if he were receiving a special guest. Lila arranged flowers in makeshift jars, spreading roses throughout all the rooms. When they finished, the house was transformed. Clean, organized, smelling of fresh flowers. It was a home ready to welcome its owner back. "It's perfect," Lila said, twirling in the clean living room. "Your mother will be very happy," Jack agreed. On Saturday morning, they went to pick up Carol at the hospital. She was different, more present, more like the woman Lila always described. The treatment had worked wonders. Her eyes sparkled again, her smile was genuine. "How are you two doing?" she asked, hugging Lila for a long time. "Good," Lila said. "Jack took care of me, and I took care of his roses." Carol looked at Jack with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." "You don't need to thank me," Jack said. "It was a pleasure." The drive home was filled with conversation. Carol wanted to know about everything, how Lila had spent the weeks, how she was feeling, if it had been difficult to be away from home. Lila talked about the garden, about the roses with names, about how she had learned to take care of them. When they arrived in front of the house, Carol paused. "It's different," she said, looking at the clean windows, at the flowers Lila had planted in small pots on the porch. "Jack arranged everything," Lila said proudly. "For you." Carol entered the house and paused again. It was unrecognizable. Clean, organized, smelling of flowers. The kitchen table had a bouquet of white roses. The fridge was full. There was a sparkle and a life that hadn't existed for months. "Jack," she said, her voice choked. I didn't expect... I wanted you to feel good coming home," he simply said. Carol sat on a kitchen chair and began to cry. It wasn't a cry of sadness, but of relief, of gratitude, of recognition for all the kindness she had received. "Mum," Lila said, worried. "I'm fine, love," Carol said, wiping away her tears. "I'm just very happy to be home." Jack waited for her to compose herself before showing her the photo. When Carol stopped crying, he took the frame from his pocket. "I found this in a drawer while cleaning one," he said. Lila told me it's your mother with a friend." Carol took the photo and looked at it for a long moment, her face transformed, her eyes filling with a different emotion. "My mother," she said softly, touching the image of the younger woman. "She was so beautiful." "And the other one?" Jack asked, although he already knew the answer. Carol looked more closely at the second woman. "This lady," she said slowly, "was very kind. She helped my mother when she needed it. I remember her." She paused, as if recalling old memories. "She always brought things for us. Food, clothes for me when I was little. My mother said she was an angel." Carol looked at Jack. "Why do you have this photo?" "Because," Jack said calmly, "that lady was my mother." The silence that followed was deep and reverent. Carol looked from the photo to Jack, then to Lila, processing the impossibility of that connection. "Your mother," she whispered. "Martha Morrison," Jack said. "She always helped people in need. Always said it was important to take care of each other." Carol held the photo against her chest as if it were a precious treasure. "So you," she began, then stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Our families already knew each other," Jack said. "They were already connected." Lila looked from one adult to the other, trying to understand what that meant. "Does that mean it wasn't by chance that I found your garden?" she asked. "I don't think so," Jack said. "I think it was reconnection." Carol began to cry again, but now they were tears of wonder and gratitude. "Your mother saved our family once," she said to Jack, "and now you've saved our family again." Jack felt his throat tighten. The discovery of that photo changed everything. The meeting with Lila hadn't just been a coincidence. It was as if the universe had conspired to bring together two families who had already helped each other in the past. "They must be happy," Lila suddenly said. "Who?" Carol asked. "Your mother and my grandmother," Lila said. "They must be happy seeing us together again." It was a simple observation, said with the innocent wisdom of a child, but it carried a profound truth that made both Jack and Carol smile through their tears. "They must be very happy," Jack agreed. Carol stood up from the chair and went to Jack. Without a word, she hugged him tightly. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder, "for everything. For taking care of me, for taking care of Lila, for giving us a new chance." Jack returned the hug, feeling the weight of the responsibility and affection that had developed between them. "Just take good care of her," he said, looking at Lila. "The rest, leave it to me." It was a simple promise, but full of meaning. Jack was saying that he would be there for them, that the connection between their families would not end there, that taking care of each other was a legacy that came from afar and would continue. Carol pulled away and looked him in the eyes. "Are you going to continue being part of our lives?" she asked. Jack looked at Lila, who was watching him with hope in her eyes. "If you want me to," he said, "I would very much like that." "We do," Lila said immediately. "And the roses want you too," Jack smiled. "Then it's decided." Carol picked up the photo again and placed it on the kitchen table, where everyone could see it. "We're going to frame it properly," she said, "and tell this story to everyone who comes here, the story of how two families reconnected." "It's a beautiful story," Lila said. "It's our story," Jack said. And for the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he was part of a family again, not just caring for Lila, but being part of something bigger, something that had started a generation ago and was now continuing. The circle had closed, and a new chapter was just beginning. Jack arrived home as the sun was setting. The house was exactly as he had left it that morning. Clean, organized, everything in its place. The garden was intact, the roses swaying gently in the afternoon breeze. Everything seemed normal, but something was different. The silence. It was a silence Jack had known intimately in recent years, but which now seemed strange, heavy. For weeks, his house had been filled with sounds he had forgotten existed. Small footsteps running through the corridors, a high-pitched voice asking about everything. Laughter coming from the garden. Now there was only silence. Jack went into the kitchen and made coffee. It was his usual routine, something he had done thousands of times. But when he sat at the table, he realized he was listening, waiting for a small voice saying good morning, even though it was late afternoon, waiting for questions about the flowers, for stories about dreams with talking roses. He drank his coffee in silence, looking out the window at the garden. The roses were beautiful. Rose, as Lila had called her, was particularly lush. Little had grown a few more centimeters. Shy continued to hide behind the leaves, but no one was talking to them. Jack finished his coffee and went to the garden. He picked up the watering can, although the plants didn't need water. It was more of a habit, a way to keep busy. As he watered, he found himself looking at the places where Lila used to sit. The smooth stone near Rose, where she would sit to talk to the flower. The little corner where she had planted some seeds she had found. Everything was there, but she wasn't. Jack hadn't expected to miss her so much. For decades, he had lived alone and gotten used to it. He had found peace in solitude, contentment in predictable routine. But a few weeks with Lila had changed all that. He had gotten used to the company. More than that, he had learned to need it. He sat on the porch and tried to read the newspaper, as he always did at that hour. But the words didn't make sense. He kept hearing phantom noises, a laugh that wasn't there, footsteps that were just the wind, a voice calling his name that was just imagination. At 7 o'clock, he gave up trying to be normal. He grabbed his car keys and drove to Carol and Lila's house. The house was lit, cozy in the golden afternoon light. He could see movement through the windows, 2 figures moving through the kitchen, probably preparing dinner. The scene was domestic and warm, exactly as a home should be. Jack stopped the car and stood there for a moment, observing. Carol was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. Lila was beside her on a high chair, probably helping. It was a normal family scene, simple, beautiful, and Jack realized he wanted to be part of it. He got out of the car and knocked on the door. Lila was the one who answered. When she saw Jack, her face lit up with a smile that made his heart leap. "Jack!" she shouted, jumping to hug him. "You came." "I came," he said, returning the small but strong hug. "How you doing?" "Good," Lila said, pulling him inside. "Mom's making dinner. Do you want to eat with us?" Carol appeared at the kitchen door, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Jack," she said with a warm smile, "it's good to see you. I was thinking about you." "How are you adjusting?" he asked. "Well," Carol said. "Very well, actually. The house is perfect. Lila is happy. I was just missing you." "I was missing you too, Jack admitted. It was the simplest truth he could tell. He had spent an entire afternoon trying to return to his old life, but he found he no longer wanted that life. He no longer wanted the silence, the solitude, the empty predictability. "Stay for dinner," Carol insisted. "I made more food than necessary anyway." Jack accepted. Family dinner was something he hadn't done in a long time, and he discovered he had missed that too. During dinner, Lila recounted her first day back home. How she had shown her mother every flower they had planted, how she had taught Carol the names she had given to each rose in Jack's garden, how she had dreamed of the flowers talking to her again. "They asked about you," Lila said to Jack. "In the dream, they wanted to know when you were coming back." "What did you say?" Jack asked, smiling. "That you would be back soon. That you like us." The simplicity of the answer touched Jack deeply. To Lila, it was obvious that he would return, that he would continue to be part of their lives. There was no doubt or uncertainty, just pure trust. After dinner, Jack helped wash the dishes while Lila played in the living room. It was a simple domestic activity, but there was something deeply satisfying about doing it as a family. "Thank you," Carol said when they finished. "For what?" "For coming back, for not disappearing when Lila left your house." Jack looked at the living room, where Lila was arranging some dolls in an orderly row. "I couldn't disappear," he said. "She's become very important to me." "And you to her," Carol said. "She talked about you all day. Jack said this. Jack taught me that. You've become a reference for her." When it was time to leave, Jack said goodbye to Carol and went to Lila, who was sitting on the couch. "Lila," he said, kneeling in front of her. "Can I tell you something?" "You can," she said, stopping playing to pay attention. Jack took a deep breath. He wasn't good with words about feelings, but some things needed to be said. "You've become very important to me," he said. "I like your company. I like talking to you, tending the flowers together, hearing you laugh. I like having you around." Lila looked at him with those big, serious eyes, processing the words. "I like your company very much too," she finally said. "I consider you my friend, my best friend." The word friend hit Jack in an unexpected way. It wasn't surrogate father or caretaker, or any other complicated role. It was simply friend. Someone she liked, trusted, and wanted to spend time with. Jack felt he had found something rare, a true bond, not based on obligation or need, but on mutual choice. Lila chose to trust him, to like him, to consider him important, and he had made the same choice. "So we're friends," he said. "We are," Lila confirmed, smiling. "And friends always visit each other." "Always," Jack promised. Over the next week, Jack visited Carol and Lila every day. Sometimes he brought flowers from the garden, sometimes he just showed up to chat. Carol was adjusting well to being home again, gradually resuming her responsibilities. Lila was happy, playful, back to the normal behavior of a 5-year-old. But there was something different now, a stability, a security that didn't exist before. Carol was no longer alone caring for her daughter. She had someone she could trust, someone who genuinely cared about their well-being. Lila was no longer carrying responsibilities too heavy for her age. She could simply be a child. On Saturday, Carol suggested they have lunch together on the back porch. "It's been a long time since we had a family lunch," she said, "and now we're family, aren't we?" It was a simple question, but full of meaning. Jack looked at Carol, who was watching him expectantly, and at Lila, who was swinging her legs on the high chair. "We are," he said. "So we definitely are." Carol prepared a simple lunch, sandwiches, salad, juice, nothing elaborate, but made with care. They set the table on the small back porch, where they could see the garden Lila had helped plant. It was a simple meal, but full of joy. They talked about everything and nothing, about the flowers that were growing, about plans for the next week, about funny stories Lila made up. They laughed together, shared food, behaved exactly like a family. Jack watched Carol and Lila interacting. He saw how Carol had regained her maternal energy, how she was present and attentive with her daughter. He saw how Lila had become carefree again, how she laughed easily and asked silly questions. They were mother and daughter again, not just two people surviving together, and he was part of it. For the first time in years, Jack realized that he was no longer alone, not just physically but emotionally. He had people who cared about him, who wanted his company, who included him in their lives. He had a chosen family, created through improbable circumstances, but maintained by genuine affection. After lunch, Jack offered to take Lila for a walk. "There's a beautiful field not far from here," he said, "full of wildflowers. I think you'd like it." "Can I go, Mommy?" Lila asked. "You can," Carol said, "but be careful, okay?" "I'll take good care of her," Jack promised. The field was a 15-minute drive away. It was an open area, covered in green grass and dotted with wildflowers, daisies, small sunflowers, some wild roses. There were a few scattered trees offering shade, and on the horizon gentle hills stretched as far as the eye could see. "It's beautiful," Lila said when they got out of the car. "It is," Jack agreed. "I thought you'd like it." Lila ran towards the flowers, her hair flying in the wind. Jack followed more slowly, observing how she explored every corner of the field with a child's natural curiosity. "Look, Jack," she shouted. "There are daisies." She knelt down and began to pick some flowers, carefully choosing the most beautiful ones. Jack approached and sat on the grass beside her. "They're beautiful," he said. "Shy different from your roses," Lila said, "but beautiful too." They stayed there for an hour, exploring the field, talking about the different flowers, watching some butterflies that appeared from time to time. It was a simple and perfect moment, without hurry or pressure. When they were getting ready to go back, Lila approached Jack with a daisy in her hand. "For you," she said, offering him the flower. "Now you smile like me." Jack took the small, delicate daisy. It was a simple flower, without the elegance of the roses in his garden, but there was something special about it. It had been chosen especially for him by someone who cared. He looked at Lila, who smiled at him with all the affection in the world. Then he looked at the blue sky, feeling the gentle wind on his face. For a moment, he had a sense of absolute peace, as if all the pieces of his life had finally fallen into place. His home garden was no longer a silent memorial to Anna. It had become a place where life happened again, where a child learned to care for flowers, where laughter echoed among the roses, where new memories were created every day. It was a place where love, finally, had blossomed again. Not the same love he had lost. That would always be unique and irreplaceable, but a new love, different, equally valuable. The love of a chosen family, of bonds created not by blood but by mutual care. "Thank you," Jack said, putting the daisy in his shirt pocket. "Why?" Lila asked. Jack looked at her, this brave girl who had entered his life looking for a flower for her sick mother and had ended up bringing back his capacity to love. "For teaching me to smile again," he said. Lila held his hand. "You taught me that there are good people in the world." "We taught each other," Jack said. They walked back to the car hand in hand, leaving footprints in the soft earth of the field. Behind them, the wildflowers swayed in the wind, silent witnesses to a perfect moment between a man who had learned to live again and a child who had shown him the way. Jack drove back home with the daisy in his pocket, and his heart filled with a quiet happiness. His life had completely changed in a few weeks, and for the better. He had a family again. He had a purpose. He had love. And for the first time since Anna's death, Jack was truly at peace. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.